Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tim Buckman. I'm the owner of ASAP Lab, or a diagnostic laboratory in Fort Lauderdale with a focus on addiction treatment. I purchased ASAP Lab last year, and when I bought it, I thought I was buying a business that really helped patients cure their addiction, and I was very disappointed when I learned that that really isn't the case. So we're working toward getting back to what I initially wanted with this business, and we're investing heavily in technology to see if we can find ways where lab results will actually assist in the treatment of addiction. And we're also hosting these webinar series, which this is the first one that we're hosting, where hopefully by hosting this webinar, we're helping to find ways where treatment centers can operate better, and then that will result in better outcomes for addiction patients. We're very fortunate to have Nick joining us today. If you have suggestions for any upcoming webinars that might be helpful for the industry, or if there's any way that we as ASAP Lab can be helpful, please send me an email. My email address is listed here. It's tbuckman@asaplabcorp.com. This is the first one that we're hosting, and like I said, we're very fortunate to have Nick join us, and with that, I'll kick it over to him.
Thanks, Tim. I really appreciate you having me on and taking the time here. And I really admire the fact that you're working hard to, find different ways to be innovative and support owners and then support patients as well in their recovery journeys. I think our field can use a lot more innovation than we've had, in recent years. And that's just really the main way we're going to help to improve the situation for everyone. Addiction is continuing to be a large problem in this country. So everyone out there, I appreciate you coming and attending and listening as well. Give you a short introduction of myself and who I am if you're not familiar with me. I know most people know who I am these days, but I'm the owner of Circle Social Inc. We are a strategic consulting and marketing firm within the addiction treatment behavioral health space. We've been in this space specifically for several years. It's all that we do. And we are well known for our ability to strategically consult with clients in addition to helping them with their marketing needs. At this point, we have over $100 million worth of marketing data. We work with the small to medium-sized providers as well as a couple of the largest providers in the country, both on a consulting basis as well as an ongoing marketing basis. So we've got the data, and then on top of that, we do a lot of qualitative analysis because we're on site for the consulting components of our services. So we have close to $1 billion worth of actual operational data over the past number of years within addiction treatment. And so we take that data analysis that we're fortunate to have internally, combine it with our industry expertise and knowledge, and then provide insightful solutions for marketing owners, usually things that are a little bit more innovative than what they're used to. So today we'll be talking about what is effective marketing for rehab owners. Obviously, it's changed a lot, and that's a big part of what we're going to be talking about. The rehab industry or the addiction treatment industry has not been known for very creative marketing ideas. It tends to be what's called bottom of funnel, which means it's a final decision-making process. You have these people or these families that are in crisis. You don't need a lot of sales skill at that point. You don't need a lot of marketing skill. Your goal is just to get in front of the person that's searching in crisis before another treatment center does. That style of marketing is largely no longer effective. It's becoming less and less effective over time. We just saw the Watershed close down, 2 weeks ago. I mean, they would spend $1.5 million a month on marketing, just on their PPC campaigns. And they had one of the best digital marketing teams out there, and they're closed now. So a very clear signal, as it has been with all the other facilities that closed, in the past 2 years here, that what worked before doesn't work now. So I want to talk about that piece. What is finishing? What is no longer working? In the past, we had a lot of loose regulation in the space from a compliance standpoint, in terms of different industries having a watchdog position and monitoring what we're doing. And in terms of just who we're hiring into our facilities, you can't just hire someone with a CDEC anymore. You need someone that's actually got usually a master's level clinical certification to be able to come and do a program and deliver effective treatment. So the loose regulation really allowed for a lot of shady practices to develop, or it created an environment where a lot of providers just weren't concerned about regulations, and so they didn't bother But nowadays we've got legit script on the marketing front, and they're very strict on that. Those processes have been improving in terms of Facebook AdWords and now even Bing, banning any ads that are not approved prior to that process. So that's a big change for a lot of people. And then we have what I consider to be opioid crisis-driven searches. So by and large, within addiction, for most of addiction treatment providers' history, it was really alcohol was the main drug of choice that people were finding themselves in treatment for. That all changed with the opioid crisis. Also, a component of it that changed was a much younger crowd coming in. So the opioid crisis, actually, if you look at the numbers, it's interesting. The rate of addiction in this country has actually not increased. It's actually dropped over the past 15 years, if you look at the SAMHSA data. But the number of overdoses, particularly related to opioids, has skyrocketed. So what has happened is it created a situation where particularly moms are one of the primary drivers of sending people into treatment. There's a fear of their son or daughters overdosing. And in the past, maybe your son or daughter was smoking pot, or they were doing some cocaine, or they went to parties and drank a lot of alcohol. If you're a concerned parent, you might be bothered by that. You might, ground them. You might have discussions with them, but you're probably not going to send them to a treatment program. Nowadays, it's very different because there is this fear of death because of the high rates of overdose. Parents are very, very concerned that their child will not make it to the age of 24, 25, 26, unless they get them treatment. So that has driven a lot of the volume that we saw, especially within, late 2008, 2009 period into the 2010s. That was a big part of the volume. That's changing. A lot of the moms are not so enthusiastic about sending their children to addiction treatment anymore. So that has really driven the volume down. There has been a large amount of distrust, unfortunately, that's been built up in the field, either through what the media is saying about the addiction treatment space or parents' own experiences with it. So they sent their child to addiction treatment 5, 6, 7, 12 times. I mean, we were just in a facility where they had a person that was in there. I think he was 26 or 27. He'd been through treatment 26 times, So at some point, parents finally give up on that approach. So that's happened. And if you are in the mom groups and if you're talking to patients and their families like we do all the time, you'll hear that pretty consistently. So the high reimbursement, high readmit was also a big piece of this industry. When we're looking at a business model standpoint, there tend to be two basic business models. You have very high margins, and so you can afford to survive on a very small client base. Or on the other end, you have very low margins, and you need a lot of volume to survive. So within addiction treatment, you would think of an MAT model where they're coming in and they're getting a script or they're getting a shot of methadone. That tends to be very high volume, very low reimbursement. Whereas on the other end, you have your detoxes, you have your residentials, to some extent PHP, IOP, very high levels of reimbursement, but very low models. People were keeping patients in facilities for up to 90 days sometimes. There was a high rate of readmission. So a single patient might come back 2 or 3 times. On top of that, they might bring someone with them one of those times. So you could theoretically spend $15,000 on a marketing budget basis to bring in a client into your facility, and you would still be insanely profitable, even spending $15,000 to bring that patient in. That's not realistic. That's not how most businesses work over the long term, and we've seen that with addiction treatment. So addiction treatment, being the immature market that it was, allowed for that kind of high reimbursement as the payers didn't quite understand the space, as well as the marketing tactics that kind of worked in the crisis-driven marketing that I spoke about before. Now, as the market has matured, what happens is a lot of competition comes in, as is very standard. That drives down reimbursements, that drives up the number of beds or spots that are available, and it drives up the number of people marketing within the addiction treatment space. So you're not seeing the high levels of reimbursement anymore, and you're also seeing a drop-off in the readmission rates. Some centers would literally survive off of 30. I mean, I've seen centers that had 60% of their admissions coming from readmissions, which doesn't necessarily speak well about the quality of the clinical care that the patients are receiving, or the aftercare follow-up, which actually tends to be often much more impactful. So because that's changing, this has also changed the field and the way we market. General Trust, as I talked about before, we have our John Oliver skit that everyone's aware with, from a year and a half ago now, but we still continue to see exposés, and I've even given quotes for, the Orange County Register on some of the exposés they've written on the Orange County market and rehabs. So this continues. It tends to be a negative perspective of the space. And then destination rehab overall is dying for all of these reasons. So parents in general are much less willing to send their child afield, across states, across the country, when they're not sure that they can trust rehab facilities that they're sending their children to. The cost of sending them is much higher now. Facilities are not as able to pay for transportation as they were in the past. Deductibles are higher. And because you had your high reimbursement rates in the past, you could afford to market nationally. So we literally had a 6-bed detox in California trying to run national AdWords campaigns. I mean, that's just silly. Imagine a plumber, in Fort Lauderdale running national campaigns for plumbing customers. You're just not going to see something like that because it doesn't make sense. The revenue potential isn't there. But with addiction treatment, it was. So you had all these little tiny facilities competing with the big guys, national scope, which is just not really the reality anymore. So we'll kind of cover those really shortly here for the pieces that are most relevant. In the past, we had single channel. For a lot of people, it was AdWords. Now, let me make a comment there. Again, we've got $100 million worth of marketing data. We've worked with, and we do work with clients that are spending $500,000 a month. Maybe in the past, they were spending $1 million, $1.5 million a month on AdWords. The reality is that most facilities had incredibly poor tracking in place. Even today, we go into smaller facilities and they'll tell us, oh, yes, our cost per admission off of our AdWords campaign is $1,000 or $2,000. They're always wrong. We've never seen anything consistently come in under $4,500 as a cost per admit over a length of time. Sure, in a given month, you might have a really good month, but if you look at in the aggregate and 3 to 6 months windows, $4,500 tends to be the cheapest that we ever see. And that's historically as well. So that's not just now with the high cost per clicks and cost per calls that you'll get from your AdWords campaigns. That's going back to 2014, 2013. It's actually one of the big reasons that some of the facilities closed down, some of the bigger players that are no longer here. Because again, we have access to some of those facilities' data and we were able to look at their campaigns. And what we usually see is a $15,000 cost per admit when it's attributed appropriately and tracking is set up appropriately. So a lot of people just weren't looking at their campaigns. They were making assumptions that they were effective, or they were not tracking appropriately. They didn't really know how to track those campaigns. And so again, they were just kind of making guesses or they had bad data in place. So AdWords was never an effective channel. Honestly, for a larger facility, it never brought in more than 10% of admissions across the board, which is a shock for most people to hear because all we heard about was AdWords for such a long time. But the reality was that it was never an effective channel. It could never be a reliable source of admissions to drive results for a facility and push up census. So nowadays, you need an omni-channel marketing campaign. And again, in the past, you really needed this too, but to be successful long term. But now it's very clear, it's very prominent because you can't survive without it. So omni-channel means that you are building integrated campaigns where I have our Facebook campaigns combining with our AdWords campaigns, combining with SEO, also supporting the business development team and marketing with local PR or community engagement practices and CU events. All comes together to support a consistent experience for the potential patient, as well as supporting each other. So real easy examples I like to give is if you take an AdWords campaign and a Facebook campaign and you put them together, you'll generally see a 10% lift in the number of calls and admissions coming into a treatment facility. That's because the Facebook campaigns are going to support the AdWords campaigns and vice versa through retargeting and other channels. In the same respect, you can see TV campaigns, radio campaigns tend to have a very strong effect on the number of business development referrals coming in. So many treatment centers make the fatal mistake of looking for a cost per call off their radio campaigns or a cost per admission off of their TV campaigns. This is a wrong way to do it. You have to look at an integrated overall lift in your call volume and an overall lift in your business development referrals, overall lift in your admissions. Because when you have multi-channel strategies, They will support each other. You think about it just like a normal marketing campaign that you're familiar with. When I'm looking at McDonald's, I see McDonald's on TV, I see it on billboards, I get flyers in the mail, right? And all of this contributes to my overall recognition of McDonald's and my willingness to go there, et cetera. So it's looking at how those channels combine and support each other. Final attribution, which is the idea that you can take the final place that a person called from and then compare that to if they converted to an admission and determine your marketing channel CPA that way, your cost per admit that way, is wrong. Most of the time, people are not going to see an ad and call. And this is quite normal, right? If we think about it from a standard perspective, when was the last time you saw a TV ad for a car and then went out and bought one? When was the last time you saw a TV ad for Tide detergent and went out and bought it, right? Nobody does these things. It's not how marketing works in most channels. The confusion that a lot of addiction treatment providers have is that is how it works for high intent key terms with AdWords, with SEO, and to some extent the patient brokering and the call buys that was going on in the past. So those people are in a final decision making place. They're looking for addiction treatment near me, right? A very clear sign that we're looking for help right now. That's very possible to convert into an admission on a single phone call because they want to come into treatment now. But most other marketing channels, no one's sitting on Facebook or reading the newspaper or watching TV, just waiting for an ad to pop up so they can get into treatment. It doesn't work that way. It's much more of a long play. So when you do a really good job of omni-channel marketing, your Facebook campaigns, your TV campaigns, when someone actually then goes to look online on Google for treatment centers near them and your name pops up, they already know who you are. They're already familiar with you. So you won't be able to track that campaign unless you have some really sophisticated software in place, and you can get some really high-end stuff, but that's going to cost you $100,000 a year. So most treatment providers don't have that cash available to put in the high-end tracking. But if you do, you'll see that they're clicking a Facebook campaign from 6 months ago. They came back to your website multiple times, and then they ended up finding an AdWord on their final search and called you. And that's pretty common. And you can see that with our larger providers that we have the more sophisticated tracking software in place. All right, so in the past, you had rehab referrals and professional referrals. Rehab referrals was really a tit-for-tat situation where treatment centers near each other or could be across the country that took different insurance policies or offered different levels of care, basically operated as an aggregated unit. And what this allowed is them to combine their marketing budgets and combine their forces. So you could have multiple business development reps working together to share referral. You had marketing budgets. If my AdWords campaign, I'm spending $10,000 a month, the center across the street spending $10,000 a month, and our buddy, down the way is spending $10,000 a month. Well, now we technically have a $30,000 a month marketing budget rather than $10,000 a month marketing budget. So there was this kind of sharing that was going on that allowed providers to have larger marketing budgets and resources than they traditionally would. This has died off just because there's too many in place right now. Insurance payers are also looking for a stronger continuums of care. So many facilities have started to offer a full continuum of care and are no longer, you could say, trading for different levels of care. A lot of people are going in network. A lot of people are taking more insurance policies. So for all these reasons, the rehab referrals have really died off. It's not possible to sustain a program on that alone. Traditional healthcare works off of professional referrals. So if you're looking at a standalone surgical center, if you're looking at a senior living facility, if you're looking at an MRI scan place, they are dependent on general practitioners or the hospitals to refer into their facilities. So their marketing budgets tend to be smaller because they have just dedicated people within the community that are building these relationships. Now, professional referral sources are incredibly different from rehab referrals. So rehab referrals was more of a tit for tat, unfortunately. It wasn't looking at the quality of the facility. It was just saying, hey, you guys take Cigna, we don't. You guys take, or we take Anthem, you guys don't. Let's do a trade here. It's very easy to market. Whereas a professional referral source is very, very concerned about the quality of the clinical care in your facility, and they will only refer patients to centers that have the highest of clinical quality. So rather than just being a buddy-buddy relationship where you could go to a conference and meet people and see who might be a good fit for your facility, now you have to show the professional referral sources that you are a quality provider. Your business development reps have to be trained in that kind of conversation and in providing that kind of value. So it's a very, very different style of marketing than people are familiar with in the past. And that's why most business development reps that were supposedly successful in the past are not successful anymore, and they have not been able to transition their skill set over. So a lot of centers are struggling with the new model. High reimbursements, we talked a lot about. Low deductibles, we'll touch on briefly. So there is a direct relationship, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, between the price of something and the amount of trust that is needed to be built to make that purchase. The lower the price, the lower amount of trust I need to build with my prospective patients or referral partners. So if my deductible is $0, it really costs me almost nothing to come into treatment or send my loved one to treatment, especially when travel was being reimbursed as well. So it's just kind of like, well, they can go here. The facility looks nice online. Person I talked to seemed fine. Let's send them. Nowadays, you're asking people to pay $5,000, $10,000 out of pocket to cover a very high deductible. It's a very different decision. It's a very different conversation. So think about the fact, like, let's say you went to the supermarket and you wanted to buy a new candy bar. And you see a new candy bar that you've never seen before, and you're in the mood for a candy bar. What's the chance that you'll purchase that new candy bar rather than one that you're familiar with? I mean, after all, the thing costs like 50 cents. You don't really care, right? So you're willing to try that new candy bar. Not too much of a problem. You get a high percentage of people that will try it. Now, let's say you have a new car brand out on the market. So think of Kia. When Kia first came on the market, how many people were willing to buy a Kia? What if you had a car brand that you've never heard of, and you want a car, you're going to buy a car, but are you going to drop 20 to 30 grand on a car that you've never heard of? There's no way in hell, right? That price point requires a lot more trust. So you want to know how reliable the company is. You want to know how long the cars have been on the market. You want to know how often they break down. You want to know what the safety ratings are. You want to know friends that have driven them, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to be asking a lot more questions. You're going to be a lot more discerning in your decision-making process when you have a lot more money at stake. So that's what's happened. A lot of what we do when we go in on the consulting basis is actually training the business development team in these new models, as well as training the call center teams. So a lot of call center teams were used to a very transactional approach. It was, what kind of insurance do you have? What are you looking for? Okay, let's get you in. Now you have to be very empathetic. You have to build relationships. You have to understand the pain points of the people calling in and why they're calling in that day. And then you have to be able to navigate that conversation to get people to make a decision to choose your facility over the 5 to 7 other facilities that tend to be calling these days. Because of the bad press in the field, people are a lot more cautious because of the high deductibles and the high amount of money they have to pay. They're a lot more discerning. So you're not going to be able to have a short conversation with someone on the phone. You're going to have to be very empathetic, very engaging, very knowledgeable, and highlight how your program is different from every other program out there. And that is often not saying, well, we've got great clinical staff, right? Or our team here is the best, because you can't get that sense across on the phone, right? Not to mention the fact that every single center says the same thing, so it doesn't differentiate you. So we talked about the bad press here. It has changed a lot. The field was rather unknown. People looked at it as a healthcare space, and they assumed that just going to a hospital, I'm often going to go to the hospital that's closest to me or that I call first because I trust the healthcare profession in general. Nowadays, with the bad press, people don't trust the addiction treatment profession. So there's actually a barrier to entry, which makes your marketing that much more difficult. So we'll go bottom of the funnel already. That's your SEO, that's your AdWords, that's your patient brokering, that's your call buys. These are people that are ready to come into treatment now. It's a very, very small percentage of people, as we'll talk about shortly. The majority of people that eventually need addiction treatment are not looking for addiction treatment right now. And so to get your goal to be able to market effectively, you have to get in front of those people before they're ready to make the decision, so that when they are, they call you. And ideally, they don't even go to Google, right? They bypass that and just search for your name. It's highly effective. It's the same way as when you're marketing a hamburger, when you're marketing a car, right? I'm not trying to market to you at the point of purchase. It's too late. I'm trying to market to you before then so that you make the decision to come in. I often give the example of diapers. There's been a switch over to voice search for a lot of people. A lot of people are using, Alexa and their Google Homes. And my sister is on her 3rd child now. And so she orders diapers and she goes, Alexa, can you order diapers for me? And Alexa says, would you like to order a 12-pack of Huggies like you ordered last time? And she says, yes. So she has already made her decision on the brand that she wants. And there's no opportunity for an ad to squeeze in and chase her mind. Even when you go to the supermarket, there's all these different brands available on the shelf, and maybe one has a discount or something catches your eye. And so as a brand, as a company, you have an opportunity to get people's attention. That's changing, right? And this is what you want to think about when you're looking at your long-term marketing strategies is, how do I make sure I get in front of people so that when they decide to make a search and they don't search for something generic like addiction treatment, that they're just searching for our name, because that's when you become really effective. The most successful clients that we have, when we look at the back-end data and we look at their Google Search Consoles and all their other search data, their branded searchers are always the highest. So the name of the facility is actually the most searched term that's driving calls and driving admissions. That shows you that that facility has a very good reputation because people are skipping the addiction treatment search and they're searching directly for the name of the facility. Final point to note is, in the past, there was a lot of high call volume, low conversion. So some of the larger providers that closed, they were getting call volumes of literally 60,000 calls a month. Now they were converting maybe 0.5% of those calls. So you had this huge team of 60 people in a call center and all the infrastructure to support it, and you were still only getting 250 admissions off of 60,000 calls. I mean, that's insane. The amount of calls that you're going through. I mean, that's worse than cold calling. Like literally in most industries, you could cold call random houses and close at 1%. So the marketing was so inefficient and the spend was so inefficient. The entire operations were just incredibly expensive. The only reason it worked is because you had the insanely high reimbursement structure of the past. Nowadays, you can't do that. You have to have an effective marketing spend. You have to have a very branded marketing spend so that the people calling into your facility are almost ready to come to you before they get on the phone. So you can have a much lower call volume, but a much higher conversion rate. So generally, we work with facilities to get their conversion rate up to at least 5%. Ideally, I'd like to see it above that. If we could get 10 to 12, that would be fantastic, but that's quite hard for a lot of facilities. So if we can take it from 0.5% or 1% to 5%, well, that's a 5x increase in admissions, right? And so this is kind of the thinking that a lot of facilities have to get around, is their marketing often isn't the problem. It's the kind of calls that they're generating or the quality of their call team and converting those calls. If your call team can't convert at 5%, either you're marketing the wrong way, and so you're getting very poor quality calls. That's where your call buys come in, right? That's where your unbranded campaigns come in. A lot of people are on these crappy directory sites and these third-party websites that aren't branded. That's where you get your low conversion volume. And then also the untrained staff. So most programs, when we first start working with them, their call teams are pretty bad. It's not to say they're not nice people, because most programs will tell us that they have a great call team. Well, what they really mean is they have a really nice call team. And the people are, maybe they're in recovery or maybe they really care. That's fantastic. And I'm glad you have caring staff, but they're not trained to help people make a decision. And that is what has to happen, because you're dealing with people and families that are struggling with addiction. They've been struggling with it for 10 years, right? So why are they calling today? They continued in the decisions they were making and the way they were living for 10 years. Unless you're pretty good at getting them to see the light and understand what the real need and benefits of treatment are, they're going to continue doing what they've been doing for the past 10 years. So there is a very clear skill set that's needed on the phone, and the team has to be trained appropriately for that. I want to run through the numbers really quick. I get a lot of business plans across my plate. You know, a lot of people that are looking to expand or acquire facilities. We work with private equity as well when they're in an acquisition mode. And you'll always see this statistic that the addiction treatment industry is a $35 billion industry. Well, it's not really true for a lot of reasons. So part of it was, like we said, the high readmission rates in the past. And the fact is that a lot of those high readmission rates, especially when you looked at South Florida, Arizona, Orange County, California, was that people weren't really interested in treatment. It was just, 18 to 26-year-olds that were looking for a place to stay. The quality of treatment wasn't very high. So maybe they just wanted a nice place to live and play Xbox while they were doing drugs. So your high readmission rates had a certain percentage of that in these high volume areas. The reimbursement is nothing like what it was before. And then finally, you have your moms that were a huge impetus for driving, especially the opioid abuse-related admissions that are falling off, and they're not admitting nearly as much as they did in the past. So all of that has really driven the industry down. Now, on top of that, you have MAT coming in very strongly. So traditionally, MAT was more for the Medicaid and the no resource, demographics. And so your higher end providers really didn't pay attention to that trend at all. But now it's becoming very clear, especially as the legislation gets on board, and especially as academics become more involved in the addiction treatment space, and the fact that MAT reduces death rates to such a high extent. I mean, even Hazelden, right, got onto the MAT, incorporated those services quite a while ago now. And so this shift in the industry has changed the model in many ways, has extended the model in many ways, and it has started to move things more towards an outpatient basis and away from residential models. So all of this is driving the revenue of the facilities way down compared to what used to be before. Now, also looking at the numbers, you've got about 20 million Americans are reported to have a substance abuse disorder. The data is quite clear for a couple of decades now that 80% of people recover on their own. So out of that 20 million, you're only going to have 4 million that actually need professional treatment services. Now, that number is not 100% accurate, because even though 80% recover on their own, that doesn't mean that their mom, their dad, their wife, their husband is not going to push them into treatment, even if they might recover on their own. So that number can be higher. But just kind of for an example, we're seeing pretty clearly that 4 million people really seriously would need professional treatment to get support. Now, 4% of people are seeking treatment at any given moment. I mean, that's not a lot, right? And it's very clear. We talk about denial. We talk about people needing to be ready, all this kind of stuff. I'm not going to get into the debates on that, but the reality is that only 4% of people struggling with addiction are seeking treatment. So you're down to 160,000 people. Now, again, you can look at those numbers and say, well, actually, the people seeking treatment aren't the ones admitting. Most of the time, it's loved ones and family that are admitting them in. So that number is actually higher. But you're getting a sense of just how low these numbers are here, and some of the struggles that we have as an industry with a number of facilities that are currently in the market, and how many beds are available. So finally, you get 50 to 60% with people with commercial insurance. And that's really for your drugs like alcohol, maybe cocaine, possibly prescription pills. It really changes. But when people tend to get more into the deeper subcultures, the deeper drug cultures, and we get into things like heroin, you get into the synthetics like fentanyl, people have gone pretty far down a path, and they tend to have lost insurance by that point. So what really saved the industry for quite a while was Obamacare and the Mental Health Parity Acts that allowed 18 to 26-year-olds to be under their parents' insurance. So as you well know, most of those people coming into the facilities would have no insurance whatsoever if they were not covered under their parents' insurance. So this allowed the industry to kind of bloom from a financial perspective in a way that wouldn't have happened without it. But the reality is a lot of people struggling don't have insurance, especially when it gets into the deeper opioids. So when you're looking to find people that have commercial insurance, you're actually looking for people that tend to be employed, that tend to be struggling with an alcohol issue or a higher end drug issue, that they have the cash to afford something like an 8-ball, from time to time. So all that kind of shows us that there's not that many people on a yearly basis searching for treatment, and there's a ton of facilities. I think we still have about 14,000 in the country, right? And if each of those just had 10 beds each, you're looking at 140,000 beds available for treatment, but only 80,000 people searching for treatment. So when you look and say that, only about 50% of beds are full at any given facility across the country, this is one of the reasons why. Now, if we look at Google and the internet in particular, there's only a certain percentage of people that are looking for addiction treatment services on the internet. This is another big mistake a lot of providers make. They're only marketing online. That's definitely the wrong approach. You have to have an omnichannel approach. You have to integrate your strategies that we talked about before. So 80,000 searches a month for high intent terms. These are things like detox near me, addiction treatment near me, cure for heroin addiction, all that kind of stuff. 60% of people click on the first 3 items on Google. So if you are not, from an SEO standpoint, ranking on the first 3 terms, then you're basically missing out on the vast majority of potential clicks. Only 1% of people click on ads, so about 800, right? So 800 a month are clicking on ads. So if you're out there and you're competing with the other 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 facilities that are trying to run national marketing campaigns on Google, you're competing for a total of 800 high intent clicks, which is why it's so expensive. So Google is an auction-based process, and the more people that are bidding on key terms, the more expensive it's going to be. Everyone's fighting for this really, really small pond of potential patients, and this is why the businesses struggle. So the vast majority of patients are not searching online. They're not clicking AdWords, and they are influenced by decisions and marketing campaigns and outreach much farther back in the decision-making process. Finally, you have people that are searching for 5 to 7 treatment centers before finally making a decision. So let's say that I get one of those, let's say I get half of those clicks, I get 400 of the clicks on the ad campaign. Well, I'm still competing with 5 to 7 other centers that those people are calling. So all this makes it very, very hard to market from this kind of bottom of funnel perspective that everyone's used to on SEO and AdWords. It's just a lot of competition. It's very hard to try and get your facility ranking in the top 3. You can't do it nationally anymore. Google's algorithm has really moved locally for the most part, and it will continue to do so. I mean, we just had the release where Google actually now has a recovery search tool right on its homepage that eliminates all for-profit treatment centers, it eliminates all ads, so marketing on Google is becoming much, much more difficult. And which means that you're going to have to switch to this long-term model where you're getting in front of the right people over a consistent period of time. And that's a mindset shift for a lot of treatment centers, and they don't know how to put their spend effectively. They don't know how to attract, or they don't know how to track the effectiveness of those campaigns. It's something that we have to work with clients on a lot of the time. All right. So just real quick, understanding the marketing aspect of things, people often lose sight of this. Often a lot of clients, when they call us, they say they just need more calls. As I mentioned, calls is often not their biggest issue. It's the quality of the calls, or it's the training of the call team, or the training of the business development team that actually tends to be a bigger issue. We just tripled the profitability of a treatment center we went into 2 months ago just by reorganizing the way that they were doing billing and initial consultations. Like, had nothing to do with marketing. They already had the volume. They just were able to triple revenue by making a couple of these tweaks because they weren't really doing things effectively. So there's all these opportunities, and this is kind of your general model here is you've got a cost per admit, right? This is what most people think of. They look at their marketing channel and they say, okay, what's my cost per admit on AdWords? What's my cost per admit from business development? Again, this is the wrong way to look at it. You want to look at an aggregate. It's okay to pull out final attribution. That should definitely be part of the KPIs and part of the tracking that you're putting into place, but it can't be the whole thing because you're often unable to track how your business development team supported your Facebook campaigns and vice versa, or how your TV campaigns are supporting your AdWords campaigns. It's very, very hard to parse out. So you want to make sure that you're trying to at least get a sense of that, but at the same time, looking at your overall data. And that's only one piece of your overall profitability, right? So cost per admit is obviously the responsibility of the marketing, the admissions, and the business development team. And notice it's all 3 of those working together, right? They're not individual. I can't tell you how many times I walk into a center and the business development team is fighting with the marketing team who's fighting with the call center because they all want credit for the admission, which is just stupid. You guys are a team. You guys are here to help patients, and everyone should be working together to help patients. And you're just wasting time trying to figure out who is credited with that admission. It just doesn't help anyone. Finally, you have length of stay here. So length of stay is obviously critically important to your profitability. So if your admissions are coming in at a decent cost per admission, which I would set at about 3 times your average daily reimbursement. So if my average daily reimbursement is $500, I would want my CPAs to be under $1,500 as a blended CPA, right? Not per channel, because certain channels like AdWords are always going to be much, much higher. Other channels like business development or alumni are going to be much, much lower. So it's blended. But the length of stay is your clinical team's responsibility, right? Your marketing department, your admissions department, your business development, they really don't have much of any influence on length of stay. That is up to your clinical team. If your clinical team does a good job with documentation and with UR, they will get approvals for longer lengths of stay. And they're also critical in terms of getting the patient themselves to finish treatment and not AMA, not leave against the medical advice. If your clinical team, we've walked into facilities where they had literally 50% of their patients were leaving halfway through their stay. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were being lost every single month because the clinical team was kicking people out of the program, or they weren't good at identifying a potential AMA and then intervening to address that situation. So your clinical team is critical in your profitability. And then obviously clinical working together with billing for your average daily reimbursement. So a lot of people are moving in network now, which is a very good move. You should be definitely looking at strategically moving in network with appropriate providers. Your clinical team is going to have a big influence on that in terms of the documentation that they have, right? As well as the quality of the care that you're delivering. So if you're doing good outcomes tracking and your clinical team is good, you can take that back to your insurance payers and negotiate rates up, which they are often happy to do within the field of addiction treatment. And then billing, of course, has a very clear role in that too. They can help you understand strategically which providers to go and network with. They can tell you what you should be getting reimbursed with on an out-of-network basis based on other accounts that they're seeing. And they should be working with you to make sure that UR and VOBs and things are done appropriately so you get the highest reimbursement possible. So all this really comes together to make sure that you have a profitable center. So we talked about this quite a bit on the omni-channel approach. I just want to point this out. This was a client that we went to, I think this was about a year ago, actually. But as you can see here, this is just some of their channels where their visits were coming from the website. And you can see the vast majority here were coming from Facebook. Here we've got Facebook, 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 Facebook. It's a full probably 80% of their visits were coming from Facebook. Now that's a problem because just like what happened with AdWords in 2017, if that was the only way that you were generating calls, you died, right? You had no call volume whatsoever, which means you have no admissions. You look at a large provider like Sovereign. Sovereign went all in on business development, and they had business development reps across the entire country. They also collapsed and went under because they were completely relying on the business development teams. And we see this a lot with providers where they go all in. They do all AdWords, or then they do all SEO, and then they fire the SEO team to do all business development, and it kills you. What you need to do is you need to have multiple channels because, one, they're going to support each other, and then two, it provides you multiple throttles to move up and down. So if my Facebook campaigns are not driving the results I'd like to see in a given month, I can push some more money into AdWords, or I could give some overtime to my business development team because they seem to be doing really well this month. And that's going to help me even out my census. So by having different throttles and levers to pull, I give myself the tools to drive effective business and make decisions that are profitable for us, especially because when you have multiple channels, it just creates a safety net. Now, some people don't like that. What a lot of centers are often trying to do is maximize their revenue. And so they'll say, okay, well, our cost per admit from business development is only $1,000, the past couple months. So we're going to go all in on business development because that's giving us the cheapest CPA. Well, it's a really poor business strategy. Really sophisticated business, what they'll always do is, yes, you want to double down on what's working, but you will always keep multiple channels running because you need volume more than you need high margins. Volume creates a sustainable long-term business practice where high margin tends not to last. So very important to understand. What doesn't work, this is a bunch of the junk that we see when we go into different treatment providers. This is actually from a really big treatment provider, really famous one. This is kind of junk that they were putting out, where freedom from addiction can be found, surrounded by people with purpose and passion, sun, sand, and seed, right? Nobody cares about this. This is not going to drive calls into your center, especially from a Facebook perspective. And again, you have to be thinking that the people that are coming to see you on Facebook are not coming for treatment right now, right? AdWords, yes. SEO, yes, right? They're looking for treatment right now. They're going to call, but people on Facebook are not. So this means nothing to 99% of people that are seeing it. When you look on the back end of a campaign like this, you'll see click rates of like maybe 0.5% if they're lucky, if the targeting's decent. Whereas we'll get click-through rates of 4 to 7% on our top-of-funnel campaigns. And we get that because it's very effective in terms of how we're addressing the needs of the community, what they're looking for. We're not trying to sell people right away, which is a huge mistake people make with more traditional marketing. So this stuff doesn't work. You need to get away from it. This stuff also doesn't work. So addiction centers, right? This is one of your call-by websites, just like rehabs.com. We will recommend clients, if they really want to have a listing on those sites because they do pretty good with SEO. And so they will get a decent amount of traffic volume to a certain site, and it's fairly cheap. But you don't want to be buying calls from these sites. So calls from these sites are very expensive, right? People will pay anywhere from $30 to $500 a call. Using them is illegal in Florida as well as some other places. So you have to be careful of the laws, and those will continue to, I think, change and probably start to match the Florida laws eventually. And then finally, there's no brand there. So what happens when you're buying calls is that they're just calling a random number, right? They're calling this 855 number, for example, and they might just randomly feed you a call. So nobody knows who you are. They don't know what treatment you offer. There's no long-term advantage to these kinds of campaigns. And that's where a lot of providers, Watershed being one of them, Sovereign was like that, Elements was like that. These guys bought a lot of calls. And because they bought calls, they never built up a long-term brand. And so we're never able to drive down their CPAs. They were completely dependent on this third party and the calls that they were sending them, the quality that they were driving, as well as the fact that it was completely unbranded. So if I don't know who I'm calling, again, think of your car example, right? If you went to a random website and called them and they just put you in touch with a random car dealership that was selling, psychomotor cars that you've never heard of, are you going to buy that car? There's no way in hell, right? So you're going to want to buy from someone you know and trust. And that's really the purpose of marketing, is to build those relationships. So these sites are really, really ineffective. I highly recommend not using them because you'll eventually fail. Sometimes you can get decent CPAs off of them, but most of the time you can't. And because of that, long-term, you end up kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So reasonable cost per admit, talked about that already, 3 times your average daily reimbursement. We definitely want quality over quantity these days. I don't want 60,000 calls converting at 0.5%. I want 10,000 calls converting at 10%, right? If I'm converting 10,000 calls at 10%, I'm going to be able to fill 1,000 beds a month, right? 1,000 beds a month I could fill with that call volume. So think about it that way. So the marketing mix, this is really what a lot of people are struggling to understand, and this is what we always recommend clients as a starting base. Your individual business is always going to be unique, and you have to find what works for you, but this is a pretty good place to start. So business development should be 70% of the admissions coming into your facility. These should be coming from professional referrals, not just rehab relationships, and 20% alumni ideally. Now that 20% alumni is hard for a lot of people to get to, especially if they don't have a good alumni program, a good alumni coordinators in place, et cetera. But 20% is ideal. Alumni tend to be your lowest cost per admit out of all the different channels that are available. Search-driven, ready to buy, SEO and AdWords. AdWords, you never want to be more than 10%. SEO, sometimes you can get that over 10%. It depends on your facility, the number of competition in your area, how much it costs you to compete, all that kind of stuff. But we recommend it not being super high because it's just not that high of a volume of people searching for treatment versus the volume you're going to get from professional referral sources, as well as building up long-term relationships. So customer journey nurturing, you talk about Facebook, TV, radio, sponsorships, email, etc. That should be about 20% because you need to build out that long-term funnel. And you need to nurture people over a decision-making process that can be anywhere from 2 days to 6 months. And you're not going to be able to do that unless you're getting in front of people early. So that will combine with your business development. It will combine with your SEO and your AdWords to drive effective conversions, admissions into the facility, but it has to be part of the mix. If you're looking at a smaller budget, you're looking at sponsorships, emails, Facebook. If you have a bigger budget, you're looking at radio, TV. The only thing I always point out is these kind of campaigns take minimum 3 months to get going and often 6. I have never seen a radio campaign perform effectively with less than 3 months in operation. So most providers have this crazy mentality that somehow marketing works like magic and it's just a formula, and they'll go and they'll pay a radio sponsor a week, or they'll go, I've literally seen them go to TV stations and say, we'll give you $10,000 for a week. I mean, it's just a complete waste of money. You're not going to get anything out of it. You have to build up frequency and you have to build up consistency over time. And that frequency has to be managed. That's why you have professional media buyers, because it's not easy to do to be really effective. So TV and radio, Facebook, sponsorships, these are all long-term plays that you're not going to be able to track with a call tracking number and track the number of calls to admissions. It just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. I know providers would love that if that was the case. So call center quality and follow-up is super important. You should be converting at 5%. That's your goal, and you should be following up. So if you have an inquiry coming in and you never talk to that person again, that's a horrible, horrible process to have in place or practice. You should be following up at least every day for the first week. And ideally, you're following up anywhere from 10 to 12 times before you're considering that person to no longer be qualified or just not interested in your program. But follow-up is super important to maintain a successful center these days. Traditional PR, I'm a big fan of this. We help our clients with this kind of stuff all the time. You just find out what they're doing in the community that's good. You partner with those local community papers, and then you get this pushed out. This went out to I want to say 15,000 or 20,000 people. And the whole thing cost us about $400, right? To write up the articles, to spend the time connecting with the journalists and the facilities and everything. There wasn't a large labor cost involved. So to get this kind of stuff pushed out is very, very effective. It's very, very beneficial. And it builds up your reputation in the area, which is where you want most of your patients coming from anyway, from a cost standpoint. Now, I've talked a lot about the death of destination rehab, and this continues to be the case. You will see an ability to survive as a rehab if you're very specialized nationally. So I just give an easy example is the LGBT community. I'm not going to be able to open up a treatment center in Jacksonville, Florida, for example, and have enough of an LGBT population to serve a large treatment center. It's just not going to happen because there's just not enough individuals in that community. But if I want to run it nationally, it's very effective because what I want to do is I want to build up a virtual cycle of business. So what happens is I get really good at the marketing. I get better at it over time. I know what works for this community, what's important for them, what they're looking for. Then my clinicians also get better at delivering that clinical care. So as my clinicians get better, that drives our referrals, both with current patients, with alumni, and with professional referral sources. And then again, we get better at the marketing because we help understand our patients better. We get more of them in, which helps us with their clinical. And there's just this virtuous cycle of building a really, really good program for a specific group of people. So that can work nationally because I'm going to want to go somewhere, whether it's LGBT, whether I'm a pilot, whether I'm an EMT or a teacher or a firefighter. Maybe I'm an older adult, I'm 50 plus. I don't want to be with the young kids in treatment. There's all these different demographics that you can reach out to and become very specialized in that are going to be super beneficial as a newer program or as a specialty program, or if you're trying to survive as a destination rehab. So this is what we recommend to a lot of treatment providers that are in oversaturated areas. If you're trying to market yourself as a drug and alcohol addiction center that's dual diagnosis and has caring staff, well, that's what everyone says. You're not going to have a very easy time doing that. And I can tell you it makes our job a hell of a lot harder when we got clients trying to do that. Marketing is building trust at scale in a way that drives the desired action. This is what I tell my team constantly. And it's probably the thing that most treatment providers fail to understand. A lot of providers think that marketing is about sales or marketing is admissions. It's not. Marketing is building trust. And if you build trust effectively, that will result in calls and admissions. But if you're thinking, okay, what do I need to say to get this person on the phone? It's a horrible approach to marketing because it will eventually bite you. There has to be integrity between your clinical processes, your call teams, your business development outreach, and what's actually being said on your website or in your marketing campaigns. If there's not integrity and consistency between all those pieces, then you do not build a sustainable business because people actually get angry and upset. Watershed is a great example. If you go and you look at their online reviews, they are horrible. So there was often a disconnect between what their marketing was doing, because their marketing team, and we see this all the time, would try to optimize to get as many clicks, as many calls as possible. So they'd say whatever they thought they needed to say to do that, while that had no relation with what was actually being delivered at the facility. And so because there was that mismatch, it did not allow a brand or a reputation to be built. And brand is just reputation, right? I mean, think about who you're going to go to if you need medical services. You're going to go to somebody you trust. That's just how it works. It's not who had the best ad copy on the website. And if they had great ad copy, it got you in the door, and you meet a doctor that you don't like, you're going to leave. You're going to walk away. You're going to go find someone else or get a second opinion. So it's very, very important to have that integrity between all the processes. Marketing, and its most basic, is very simple. It's just targeted attraction, right? I need to identify my audience and get their attention, because if I don't have your attention, I can't get you engaged. I have to build a relationship over time, and then I can look at a conversion. I often say to people, think about marketing like you're one person in a room of 10 other people, right? If I'm trying to sell my addiction treatment center, I can't sell to any of those 10 people if they don't know who I am. I have to attract their attention first. I'm not going to walk in and just say, hey, who wants addiction treatment, right? No one's going to come. So I need to engage them. I need to build trust with them first. And then over time, after we've gone to coffee, they visit my center, maybe they met some of my alumni, I can say, hey, I know you need help. Why don't you come to our center and we can help you out? And that's going to lead to a conversion. So always think about your marketing campaigns in these really simple approaches. Online marketing is just like marketing face-to-face. If it works face-to-face, it'll work online. All right, we're gonna give this a shot. This is an example of drawing attention. So this is the first step. So this is a video that we created for one of our clients. So I'm not sure if you're able to hear the music on there. We tested it before and it wasn't quite clear. So there's a very dark, kind of sinister sounding music that goes along with it. It really catches your attention. But also you'll see that, this image right off the bat, right? If I'm seeing this on Facebook or if I'm seeing this on TV, it's really going to kind of pull me in right away because I'm going to wonder what's going on. And then as we get the text coming across, we see it's about opioids and addiction, and it's emotionally impactful, right? You combine the music with the video, with the statistics, and it really draws people in. What this does is it draws their attention. So again, people ask me, well, how many calls do you get off these campaigns? You don't get calls off of this kind of campaign. What this campaign does is it attracts people and makes them aware of you. And then what you have to do is you have to retarget people to get them to call. So this is the back end of Facebook. A lot of people aren't familiar with this, but you can look and see here that we can find what percentage of people watch that video, 50%, 75%, 95%. So from a marketing standpoint, I'm thinking what people are most likely to be struggling with an addiction problem in their family. The people that watch 20% or the people that watch 75%? Well, 75%, right? So I see over the week that we ran this campaign that we got, 3,000 people watching 75%. We got another, well, if we combine all of these videos, 4,000 here. So, we've got 15,000, 20,000 people that watch this video in a given week. And so we're going to tell Facebook to pull those people out because now we've identified our audience and we know that they're aware of us and we know that they have the problem that we can help solve, right? Because they wouldn't have watched the video that much if they did not have this problem or weren't concerned about it. So that's when we're going to follow up with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 levels deep of retargeting campaigns and working them through different levels of the decision-making process every step of the way. So I like Facebook because it's a very easy way to show these examples and kind of show how retargeting works. But you're doing the same thing with TV, doing the same thing with radio. Even if you do your SEO right, you're doing the same thing with SEO. Though it's a bit more of a long-term play. But I'm always thinking about how do we identify our audience, get their attention. Then how do we build engagement with them through retargeting and follow-up campaigns? Email fits very well into this as well. And then finally, how do we get them to call in and admit when they're ready? Or when we help them be ready, because sometimes people need a little bit of a push. So another example I like to give here, this was I like this example just because the data is super clear. But we can see here this quite long text, right? And we do this quite a bit with a lot of our campaigns. So marketing is about trust, and you can't build trust in 2 sentences. That's why your sand, sun, sea, and mountain crap doesn't work, because nobody cares. We look at this kind of campaign and we see that there's a very long line of text. It's very specific in what we're talking about. It gets huge results, right? Huge results. So you had 251 people like it, 88 people share it, 9 people commenting on it. I think this was a 2-week window, if I remember this campaign specifically. So you had all these people engaging like with this post because it was very targeted and it attracted their attention. It built trust with them through the copy because we were very clear that we knew who they were, we knew what their problems were, and that we had a potential to solve it. And so when you write effective marketing copy, it's because you know your audience psychologically, and you also know what your business does very well so that you can help them. So this particular program was just an online program offered by a woman that ran behavioral health coaching. So it was very easy for us to kind of build simple campaigns and track, and she was just using Facebook. And so I like to use this approach because, well, ideally you're diversifying, you're running a lot of different campaigns. She didn't need to. Her program was quite expensive. It could be anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000, depending on the amount of time that they were in it. And she couldn't handle that many patients at once anyway. So, generally we'd send anywhere from 5 to 8 patients her way a month. So she'd make about $50,000 a month in revenue, which was more than enough for her, being kind of a one-woman show and just helping people on a private practice basis. But what we can see here is that we can see the amount we spent per day, obviously, but we're looking at our click-through rate, for example. So that click-through rate tells me that I have a good ad. So on Facebook, 1% is really good. So we're getting 2 to 3 times the normal click-through rate. So we know our ad's good. We know people like it there. And this is a problem that a lot of treatment centers have, is they just look at the amount spent and they look at the number of admissions. It's a horrible way to look at it because you're missing everything in between. You can't tell what's not working. So as a marketing agency or someone running a marketing department and treatment center, you want to know what's not working and why and what you have to fix. So we know our ad is working because we have a high CTR. So that's not a problem. Then we go and we look at registrations. So registrations come from the landing page on the website. So are people hitting the landing page and they're actually signing up for this free training that we're offering them? If they're not signed up for the free training, that means that the offer is not good. It means that the landing page isn't good. There's all these other issues that could be cropping up. So we got this one to an average of 16% over consecutive weeks. I mean, it started off at like a 5% registration rate. And so we continually optimized that page until it got better and better. We optimized the offer. So we got that up to 16%. So now we know that that's good. So I know my ad's good. I know my landing pages are good. Now I need to see how much of the video that they're watching, right? So we see here, people only got through 6%. Here they get through 25, 50, 13, whatever. Complete watch rate is at 22%. So this was an hour-long video. It's quite a lot for people to watch. So a 25% watch rate is actually pretty solid. But again, that took time. We had to redo that training video a number of times to get that watch rate up to the 25% that we wanted. But now I know my ads are good, my landing page is good, my videos are good, and then we have a final kind of book a call page. And so here I can see that I need 10% of the people that watch the whole thing to book a call, and I see what my cost per call is. So again, she had a conversion rate of like 1 in 10 on average. So every 10 calls she took, she'd get someone to sign up for her program. So, this week she would have gotten like 1, maybe 2 people to sign up for the program. So she spent a whopping $1,700. She makes $3,000 to $10,000 off of that. It's a very profitable marketing campaign for her. But that entire process took months to work out because we had to optimize every step of the way. And that final step is the callability of, her being on the phone and being able to actually get the people that call in to convert to the program. So the final step is always the call team or the person answering the phone. It can't be 100% dependent on your marketing. Everyone has to work together. And that's probably the biggest thing that a lot of centers kind of fail to understand or grasp appropriately. So just reviewing here, the keys to success, you obviously need an excellent clinical program. You have to be driven by outcomes. Your clinical program is your reputation, which is your brand, which is the success of your business. You are not a marketing company. Driving marketing and calls and admissions in is not going to save you, as we've seen again and again with all these facilities that have closed down. It's too expensive. It doesn't work. To be sustainable, you have to have lean operations, which means that you have to have reasonable cost per admission CPAs. That's only going to come with a strong reputation, a strong brand in a very specific geographic area or demographic area. You're looking at 3 to 6 month campaign windows. You should never be stopping a campaign before 3 months are over. As we just looked at, really what you need to be doing during that 3 months is optimizing every step of the process and figuring out what's broken and fixing it. And as you fix it over time, that's where you're going to start to see the cost per admissions that you need. Everything needs to be highly targeted, whether it's localized or demographics. Talked about that a lot. Content needs to be personalized and value-driven. We looked at our example, a real easy example here. This was very personalized content, right? People had a message that was specifically for them, and that was also how we targeted the ads. And so they reacted to it. They responded to it, and it drove business for this particular client. You need continuous iteration, improvement driven by data. That's what we just looked at. Long-term audience build, sequencing, multi-stage, multi-channel retargeting. I mean, that stuff gets really complex. We don't have time to go into all of that today. But this is why marketing is not easy. You have to be able to build out audiences, sequences, staging, channels, retargeting across platforms and be able to track and understand appropriately what's working and what's not working. It's not something that your average person is going to be able to do. So you either have to build up a really, really good internal team or you need to outsource that. Finally, lean operations, 10 to 20% margins is really what you should be looking for these days with an addiction treatment. The days of high margins are over. Yeah, you can still find it sometimes if you find the appropriate policies, et cetera. But if you're not able to survive off of 10 to 20% margins, you're probably going to close in the next couple of years. So that's something that you definitely want to look at. So all my contact information is here. I hope that you found this training enlightening. I also speak at conferences around the country on this stuff. So if you ever see me, I think I'll be at the Mental Health Conference in Nashville next, and then I'm at the National American Mental Wellness Conference in Harrisburg in November. So you guys can come see me there or just reach out anytime. I'm happy to connect. Once again, I appreciate Team ASAP Labs for really giving me the opportunity here and letting everyone get some deeper insights into marketing. And with that, I'll hand it back to Tim.
Thanks, Nick. I thought this was really interesting, and even some marketing campaigns that I might consider for us. I had no idea you had the reach of $1 billion of operational data. That's massive. And it shows in your data that you really know what you're talking about, and I hope this has been helpful to all the treatment centers out there. Again, we're looking for other topics as well that we can hopefully host and help the industry as a whole. If you have questions for me, please feel free to reach out. My email address is tbuckman@asaplabcorp.com. I think we're just about out of time, so we probably can't do any questions, but please feel free to email either myself or Nick, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you again for joining.